Hey everybody, what's going on? I am Jamie Dawn, your evolutionary revolutionary astrologer, bringing you your celestial wisdom for the week of August 18th. I'm actually going to dabble a little bit into the upcoming days before that, just because we have some pretty intense energy leading up to our full moon on Monday. And this will go all the way through the 25th. So, good 7 days or so, 10 days, where we start to prepare. And as I'm recording this video, it's coming right before we have a Mars squaring off with Saturn aspect happening. And so that happens tomorrow on Friday. That would be the 15th of August, sorry, 16th of August. And so here we are right now, probably feeling that intensity and that tension where Saturn is basically restricting Mars from moving forward, from being able to assert itself in a way that really wants to, because Saturn is constricting the energy of Mars. However, what the wisdom of Saturn can do with this Mars energy as we go into the weekend is that it can allow us to be productive and get some things done in very controlled and systematic ways, one foot in front of the other, and just giving ourselves permission to take our time. It's a good reminder with Mercury retrograde as well. And now some other pins on the map before I dive into all the other energies that we're working with in the upcoming week. We're going to have the Sun and Mercury making a conjunction, or as I like to say, a canoodling, where they're wrapping their arms around each other. That happens on Sunday, just before the Aquarius full moon on Monday. And then we also have a Saturn and Jupiter square happening later in the week when the Sun enters the sign of Virgo. So we've got some planetary movements that are happening. Just to notate, as I always say, the planets don't make us do anything, but we do feel the influences. And this helps to put some language behind why I am feeling the way I am, why I might experience certain things, and how I can even approach them a little bit differently, because we're in a time of great, great change. And right now, as a little reminder of a pin on the map, Pluto in Aquarius, even though it's retrograding back into Capricorn for a couple months before it moves forward fully into the sign of Aquarius, it reminds us that there are systems, there are things within our collective that have to be transformed. And so we are really looking at thinking out of the box, and Pluto, being this outer planet that it is, takes some outside influences, things beyond our control, things we have to surrender to, that we have to face, and it brings it to our attention. Maybe it's something we've repressed or suppressed for quite some time, and now we have to look at it differently. And I work with the idea of a system or old traditions that are no longer serving us when Pluto is in Capricorn. Now we're looking at these traditions don't work. Now, what's the system that was supporting those traditions? How do they get revamped as well? So those are some things that we may be looking at. Also, Pluto in Aquarius is all about the knowing aspect, that objectivity, the mindset of, I just have this higher vision, and how can that be transformed? How can it be useful? How can it be of benefit to the greater good? And so see if you're dealing with a circumstance that may be uncomfortable, that it's an opportunity or an invitation to go deeper into our thought processes and our systems and say, how can I meet this or think about this differently than I've done before? I will say too that with this Aquarius full moon that we have coming up, our nervous system could be on super overdrive. So please, please do what you can to self-regulate, to unplug for just a little bit, watch the overstimulations, watch the caffeine, watch the things that might normally trigger anxiety, worries, fears, and get that nervous system going too high, the adrenals. This is going to be a pretty intense couple of days as we lead into the full moon and then moving into that Jupiter-Saturn square. Before we go deeper into the astrological piece, as you know, I like to pull cards for us to meditate on and to work with. And it's interesting because I felt really drawn to pull 3 cards prior to recording this video. And I promise you, it is objective. I didn't choose these cards. But when I shuffled and I pulled the cards from my Celtic deck, the first one that popped up was the Queen of Wands. And I thought that's interesting because this card came up a couple weeks ago for us to work with, of like, we want action and inspiration with our ideas, but yet now Mercury's retrograde. So we're having to slow some of that down and revisit, redo things, but still stand in our feminine and our power and our creativity. And how do we work with that constant expansion, contraction feeling that we're having? Well, the next two cards that I pulled, the Lover's card, and then in my deck, it's called the Shaman or the Hermit in traditional Rider-Waite deck. And so I thought that was fascinating that we're carrying this energy of the Queen of Wands into the Lover's card, which really represents that conscious connection and meaningful relationships, right? It's not just the romantic. When we think of lovers, we think of sex, right? Or people who have chosen to be sacred in union. But this is really about all of our conscious connections and using it particularly for reevaluating any romantic ties we might have, but also any relationships that feel like beloved. And I don't mean that you can't have that with a professional relationship, but this is more personal. And so we're also, the Lovers points to open communication, raw honesty, and being able to really get our hearts and our heads in the same space and to share that. Very often, the Lovers is about getting clear on our values and our beliefs and figuring out what we really stand up for. And so as we're doing this evaluation, especially with Mercury retrograde, and remember, Mercury rules the mind. So we're looking at our thinking and our thought process, or our values and beliefs, if you will. We're thinking deeply about that and speaking to it. We may find that our closest relationships no longer line up with our values. And so we may have to, with this full moon, think about letting some of that go. And if you are in a relationship that still serves and it's beneficial and healthy and all of that, the Lovers is a reminder about choice. We always have a choice with who we interact with, who we partner with, what we will and won't stand for, and to make really good choices. So as we're being challenged this week, look at this and say, does this line up with my values? If it doesn't, am I okay compromising it? And if not, do I need to have a candid conversation? Doesn't mean you have to end the relationship. Maybe it's, hey, we're at cross purposes. We're not aligned with where we're going. And so some of that energy may have to be shared. And also, finally, the Lover's card, it encourages us to take both sides, both masculine, feminine, light and shadow, all these dualities, and bring them together, harness them together, and remember that we can keep one foot in both worlds, and that's where that wholeness comes from. And then, as I mentioned, we have the Hermit or the Shaman in my deck, and the Hermit shows us where we need to take a break, where we need to withdraw, and we need to seek and find the answers within. You know, it's very easy for us to want that validation or somebody else to tell us the rules or the answers. And we're being invited to really trust ourselves, take some time out to really get clear on what is true for you. And maybe you need to carve out this time of real deep seclusion, introspection. Maybe you need a night off from socializing and working and watching TV and whatnot, and just journaling. You know, some of that may also come into play. Also, oftentimes the Hermit or the Shaman card appears when we're at a pivotal time in our life and we're considering a new direction. And so many of us we're standing at the crossroads and we're saying, what if I make the wrong choice? What if I go down that path, this path? So you'll see that doing that Ben Franklin's T chart, right? Pros and cons. Do I not? I would imagine I can think of one beloved in particular who will probably be making a big decision for his career. And I'm not talking about my beloved, but as in my partner, but somebody, a family member. And so I would imagine that in the next week or so, or even leading up to this full moon, that he will be making a decision. And he and I've had conversation about what direction to go. And he's pretty clear about his hard non-negotiables, if you will. And we did the exercise of what are your top values, and will this decision you make line up with those values? And the reason I keep pointing to that is that if we compromise what we value most, then we're not going to be able to sleep well at night. That's just the bottom line. We're going to go, oh gosh, I made this decision to take on this promotion. Now I can't spend as much time with my family, and I'm having to deal with the bullshit at work and the politics. And I don't know if I really like people leading, and yada, yada, yada. Right. And so really take time this week, carving out time before signing on the dotted line. Another good reminder with Mercury retrograde, that before we make a major decision, that we've taken the time to really think about it. So don't be the yes person automatically, or the no person automatically. Use a phrase that works for you. I use the phrase, oh, that's really interesting. I need some time to think about it. Let me get back to you. That works for me. Like I say, find something that works for you. Little bit of an emphasis with Mercury and the Sun. As I mentioned, they're canoodling on Sunday, just before the full moon. It marks the halfway point of the Mercury retrograde. So I can see some of us exhaling, going, oh God, only a few more days, 10 more days left of this, right? Well, remember, Mercury will be in shadow, so it'll take a little bit to wake up from the retrograde. However, I do feel as though with this particular halfway point, there's a particular theme that we may be revisiting at that time for the second time, maybe the third time, as Mercury is then going to start continuing to move forward, back into Leo, and then it stations direct at 21 degrees Leo on the 28th. I'm just putting that pin on the map, on the 28th of August. And then it starts to move forward again through the last degrees of Leo, and back again into Virgo, where it will continue and go on to Libra and yada, yada, yada. So the reason I say that is we get a chance to redo or rethink or really revisit a particular theme for us, right? So just think about that. What's the big overarching theme since July 16th that may have occurred? Because that's when Mercury went into shadow, and when Mercury was in the sign of Leo at 21 degrees. So keep some of that in mind. What's started here for you, right? And the fact that I'm recording this during a Mercury retrograde, I'm just laughing at sometimes my thoughts are going faster than my mouth, than is coming out of my mouth. So forgive me if I talk too fast, or if I am searching for some of my wording. So I mentioned the full moon in Aquarius, some other pins on the map here. It's going to be an intense full moon, because we've got not only the opposition of the sun and the moon standing across the sky from each other, but we have a square going on, that tension point with Uranus. And Uranus, as we know, is the great severer, the great awakener, because it's unpredictable and it can bring something in that creates a push and pull push and pull from the sun and moon tension to Uranus, that says, I didn't expect that. Now what do? I was going one direction. I was going to make this decision and release it out into the world. But here's some new information that makes me question my decision, that makes me wonder, am I making the right choice? Right. And it further is emphasized with that conjunction of Mercury and the sun. So it's going to challenge our thinking about outdated systems, traditions, what's no longer working that needs to be released. The good news is with this being a Aquarius full moon, we can use the objectivity of this air sign of Aquarius and work through what would normally create emotional instability if we're not getting what we want, if our heart's desire isn't being manifested. And one of the other things is we could really get pushy and say, I want what I want. I'm not getting it, throwing that temper tantrum, if you will. And Uranus says, but hold on, there's no need for this temper tantrum, because here's another direction you could go. Or Uranus could put some situation or information into play that says, have you thought about this? And what are you going to do now? Because maybe you don't have the resources to take on that decision, right? I'll use a rough example that if you're in a tumultuous relationship or an unhealthy relationship, and you're finally at that place where, like, I need to let this go, the end. Well, here comes Uranus in this square and in the sign of Taurus, it says, however, practically speaking, do you have the financial ability to leave this relationship? Do you have a place to go, or did they have a place to go? If you're living together, you need to kick them out, or you're leaving. What about your own survivability, if you will? And some of those practical things that are showing up, that's like, I want to make this decision, but I'm not sure. Or if you're at the beginning, it's like, maybe I need to hire the attorney and start the paperwork rolling, but I have to have this really uncomfortable conversation, and maybe I don't have the money for the attorney, right? So I'm just throwing some ideas out there, examples of how this tension could show up when we've made a decision, but then we're challenged with sticking with that decision, or if it really makes the most sense, right? How much have I invested into this relationship, into myself, and holding on to it? Is it worth really letting go? Right? Those are some things that we may be asking ourselves. And again, that's just one example of many of how it could affect you or us. And as I mentioned, Saturn is squaring off with Jupiter. That happens on Wednesday, just before the sun moves into the sign of Virgo. And remember, Jupiter's in the sign of Gemini, Saturn in the sign of Pisces. And so we've got Saturn pressing upon or challenging Jupiter. And Saturn is our planet of restriction and boundaries. It's also wisdom and maturity and manifestation. And it says, hold on, Jupiter. And Jupiter is our planet of expansion and wants to be able to broaden our horizons and inspire us and get all these things done, because it's in the sign of Gemini. So we have lots of ideas and we may want to put them into action, but Saturn's saying, don't take everything on, or you could risk burnout, right? I understand, Jupiter, you've got so many things you want to say and so many people you want to connect with. However, slow down just a minute. Remember, I mentioned the expansion and contraction. Slow down just a minute. Take your time. Don't move too fast. Give yourself permission to just take this one bite at a time. Now, so this is where this square can really help us get productive with putting our ideas into manifestation, because we are trusting that intuitive nature within ourselves. It may not always make sense, but if we can take our time, one foot in front of the other, then what we can find is the energy that with that step, we start to manifest, and we take the next step and we manifest more. And we're putting this puzzle together, if you will. I'm going to circle back to the full moon because I feel called to do this. I want to offer, if you're still watching, one more piece of information on the full moon. With it being in an air sign, the element of the full moon invites us with this air sign to write, sing, speak, anything airy mentally that helps us to release it into the essence of what we are trying to manifest. And that's where doing that work, writing it down, sharing it, talking about it on Monday, here comes that Saturn-Jupiter square, can help to manifest what it is that you're wanting to release, that you are wanting to take the next steps on in order to continue the changes in our lives that we have put into place a while ago, I feel as though also we've started, I would say, when you look at it from a pattern perspective, that we started some of these heart's desires, these things we really wanted 6 months ago at the new moon in Aquarius. Now we get the full moon where we get to see, has it manifested? If not, can I let it go? Or do I hang on to it and manifest something new with it, something transformational with it? I mentioned that the sun is in Virgo on Thursday, the 22nd. And so with the sun in Virgo, we're looking at ways in which order and getting more organized, where maybe we're a little more polished in the way that we do things. We clean up some clutter, redo some lists and priorities, focus more on our routines and rituals, find more acts of service that energize us. Well, this is where I also feel the Hermit card can really come into play as well. So after the intensity of the full moon, after this square of Jupiter and Saturn and Mercury and the sun being conjunct and all this energy being stirred up, maybe there's been some really big decisions and conversations that have been had. After all that, it's time to retreat once again to say, where do I want to go now? Let me take some time. And this is where we get more organized, and we have that support from the sun in Virgo, where it's like, I'm looking around my space and I see clutter. Do I really need that many hardcover books? Do I really need all these decorations stored away in this closet? And that's my personal confession. I actually was cleaning out my closet, my office closet here the other day. And I was like, I really don't need this anymore. So it went to donation. So I have a feeling this next week I'll find more things to organize and probably donate or get rid of. And that's just very Virgoan, which I love. And this definitely can support us to help us feel really stabilized. Because remember, Virgo is an earth sign. And so we want the stability and manifestation to happen. And in the sign of Virgo, we're encouraged to manifest and find stability through our routines, in our a healthy lifestyle, a healthy way of thinking and being, and also to have our list, to be organized. I know for myself that I can have, if I have some organizational and some structure, then I find the ability to be more creative and to be able to kind of flit and float within that structure. And it helps me feel more stable, gives me that confidence to be able to play a little bit more in the creative juices. Okay, I think I've covered a lot. I know this is a bit of a long video, so thank you if you're still with me. I am so grateful. And I'm also so grateful that you like and subscribe and share these videos. Please, if you haven't subscribed and you're watching, please do, because it will just help increase the channel and help me be able to offer some of this good work, I hope, something, even just one thing that you can use and that you can share with others. All right, you guys, thanks so much. Come find me at one2listen, jamiedawn.com, and I look forward to connecting with you. Have a great week.